Hi, Bluebell here, and today we're going to be reading The Woman in Black by Susan Hill. We've already read an extract of this in lesson, but I think it'd be really nice for us to read it as a class. So, just to remind you, Arthur Kipps, a junior solicitor, is summoned to attend the funeral of Mrs. Alice Drablow, the sole inhabitant of Eelmarsh House. The house stands at the end of the causeway, wreathed in fog and mystery, but it is not until he glimpses a wasted young woman, dressed all in black at the funeral, that a creeping sense of unease begins to take hold. A feeling deepened by the reluctance of locals to talk above the woman in black and her terrible purpose. This is Chapter 1, Christmas Eve. It was 9:30 on Christmas Eve, as I crossed the long entrance hall of Monk's Peace on my way from the dining room, where we had just enjoyed the first of happy festive meals, towards the drawing room and the fire around which my family were now assembled. I paused, and then, as often as I do in the course of an evening, went to the front door, opened it, and stepped outside. I have always liked to take a breath of an evening, to smell the air, whether it is sweetly scented and balmy with the flowers of midsummer, pungent with the bonfires and leaf mould of autumn, or crackling cold from frost and snow. I like to look about me, and the sky above my head, whether there are moon and stars or utter blackness, and into the darkness ahead of me. I like to listen for the cries of nocturnal creatures, and the moaning rise and fall of the wind, or the pattering of rain in the orchard trees. I enjoy the rush of air towards me up the hill from the flat pastures of the river valley. Tonight I smelled at once, and with a lightening heart, that there had been a change in the weather. All the previous week we had had rain, chilling rain, and a mist that lay low about the house and over the countryside. From the windows the view stretched no farther than a yard or two down the garden. It was wretched weather, never seeming to come fully in light, and raw too. There had been no pleasure in walking. The visibility was too poor for any shooting, and the dogs were permanently morose and muddy. Inside the house the lamps were lit throughout the day, and the walls of the larder, outhouse, and cellar oozed damp and smelled sour. The fires sputtered and smoked, burning dismally low. My spirits have for many years now been excessively affected by the waves of the weather, and I confess that, had it not been for the air of cheerfulness and bustle that prevailed in the rest of the house, I should have been quite cast down in gloom and lethargy, unable to enjoy the flavour of life as I should like, and irritated by my own susceptibility. But Esme is merely stung by the inclement weather into a spirited defiance, and so the preparations for our Christmas holiday had this year been more than usually extensive and vigorous. I took a step or two from under the shadow of the house so that I could see around me in the moonlight. Monk's Peace stands at the summit of land that rises gently up 400 feet from where the little river Knee traces its wind in a way north to south direction across the fertile and sheltered part of the country. Below us are pastures, interspersed with small clumps of mixed broadleaf woodland. But at our back for several square miles it is quite a different area of rough scrub and heathland, a patch of wildness in the midst of well-farmed country. But we are 2 miles from good-sized village, 7 from the principal market town, yet there is an air of remoteness and isolation which makes us feel ourselves to be much further from civilization. I first saw Monk's Peace one afternoon in the high summer, when out driving in the trap with Mr. Bentley. Mr. Bentley was formerly my employer, but I had lately risen to become full partner in the firm of lawyers to which I had been articled as a young man, and with whom, indeed, I remained for my entire working life. He was at this time nearing the age where he had begun to feel inclined to let slip the reins of responsibility, little by little, from his own hands into mine, though he continued to travel up to our chambers in London at least once a week, until he died in his 82nd year. But he was becoming more and more of a country dweller. He was no man for shooting and fishing, but instead he had immersed himself in the roles of the country magistrate and churchwarden, governor of this and that, the other county and parish board, the body and committee. I had been both relieved and pleased when he finally took me into full partnership with himself after so many years, while at the same time believing the position to be no more than due, for I had done my fair share of the donkey work, and borne a good deal of burden responsibility for directing the fortunes of the firm with, I felt, inadequate reward, at least in terms of position. So it came about that I was sitting beside Mr. Bentley on a Sunday afternoon, enjoying the view over the high hawthorn hedgerows, across the green, drowsy countryside, as he let his pony take the road back, a gentle pace to somewhat ugly and over-imposing manor house. It was rare for me to sit back and do nothing. In London I lived for my work, apart from some spare time in the study and collecting watercolours. I was then 35, and I had been a widower for the past 12 years. I had no taste at all for social life, and, although in good general health, was prone to occasional nervous illnesses and conditions as a result of the experiences I will come to relate. Truth to tell, I was growing old well before my time, a sombre, pale-complexioned man with a strained expression, a dull dog. I remarked to Mr. Bentley on the calm and sweetness of the day, and after a sideways glance to my direction, he said, "You should think of getting yourself something in this direction. Why not? Pretty little cottage, down there perhaps." And he pointed to his whip where his tiny hamlet was tucked snugly into a bend of the river below, white walls basking in the afternoon sunshine. "Bring yourself out of town some of these Friday afternoons. Take to walking. Fill yourself up with fresh air and good eggs and cream." The idea had charm, but only a distant one, seemingly unrelated to myself, and so I merely smiled and breathed in the warm scents of the grasses and the field flowers and watched the dust kicked up off the lane by the pony's hoofs, and thought no more about it, until, that is, we reached a stretch of the road leading past a long, perfectly proportioned stone house on set which arrived above, sweeping down over the whole river valley and then for miles away from the violet-blue line of the hills in the distance. At that moment I was seized by something I cannot precisely describe. An emotion, a desire, no. It was rather more a knowledge, a simple certainty, which gripped me, and all so clear and striking, that I cried out involuntarily for Mr. Bentley to stop, and almost before he had time to do so, climbed out of the pony and trap. Stay tuned for part 2 of The Woman in Black.